the beginning section, introductory section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it explains, you may very well know the verse, Radha Krishna pranaya vikritir ladini shakti asmat ekatmanav api bhubi pura deha beda gatau tau. The verse says, keeping it simple, there's eka atmanav, that there's one entity eternally manifest in two forms, like the moon and the moonshine, or the sun and the sunshine. They're inseparable. It's one entity. The sun and the sunshine are inseparable. You're not going to find some shine somewhere without a sun. You're not going to find sun somewhere without the shine. They're inseparable. Yet they're eternally manifest in two forms, Radha and Krishna. But the verse says it's one entity, like the sun and the sunshine, the energetic and the energy. So Radha is the part of the pleasure potency portion of Krishna's internal potency. We know that Krishna has unlimited potencies. How many? No limit. Unlimited. Including spiritual and material and marginal potencies, unlimited potencies. But amongst the unlimited potencies, there's categories. So in the internal potency category, there's the Hladini Shakti. There's existential potency, there's the knowledge potency, and there's the pleasure potency. Radha is the pleasure potency portion of Krishna's internal potency. And through her, Krishna enjoys. It's his enjoyment. She's not a separate entity over there. She's inseparable from him. She's him or his. We don't really have something to compare this to in the material world. We can make some kind of comparison, but it's quite incomplete. Prabhupada gives the comparison sometimes of a big businessman, industrialist, or something like that. And what's going on inside one of his businesses or factories or whatever, it's according to his plan, his people, his energy is going on over there while he's off on the golf course putting around or doing whatever he's doing. Going for a walk in the park with his dog or whatever he's doing. But he doesn't know directly. That's where the incomplete comparison is, but it's his energy. So that the spiritual world is being conducted by Krishna's spiritual potency, and the pleasure experienced by all the entities centered on Krishna is through his pleasure potency, Srimati Radharani. We've been hearing for the past 2.5 months about the special feature of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. And while he has unlimited potencies, Aishvarya, he has opulences, the very, very special feature of Vrindavan is stronger even than his opulences is his sweetness, or the feature of bliss that he has and he gives to others. And he has is in the form of Radharani, and he gives to others in the form of devotional service. For us, we're not in Vrindavan, we're somewhere else. And we're hankering for happiness, and the means to achieve lasting, genuine, permanent happiness is through bhakti. Because bhakti is Radharani's expansion, and through Bhakti Devi we can connect with Krishna and experience transcendental happiness, different than the material kind. It's quite a different category. So that's by Radharani's mercy. We're going to hear something further about Radharani's mercy. Now, if anybody online or in the room knows where this can be downloaded, where the background moves, please let me know. Make a copy and send it to me. Here's what Shatarupa was able to find. It's the same image as you see over here, but everything in the background was moving when I downloaded it, and I just didn't copy it properly. So that's less attractive than the one, but it's the same image. The pleasure potency of the personality of Godhead made her appearance shortly after Krishna appeared. And there's a very nice story about Radharani's appearance. Many of you probably know the story. You know the story? A little bit? Okay. Well, the father and mother of Radharani, his name was Vrishabhanu and her name was Kirtida. And there's some interesting description of how she came, which family she came from and which family he came from. But we'll skip all that. He was a very dear friend, not relative, but a very dear friend of Nanda Maharaj. Nanda Maharaj was the son of Parjanya, and Parjanya was one of the sons of the king Shurasena. King Shurasena had two wives. One was a Kshatriya wife, and through the Kshatriya wife, Vasudeva, Kunti, and others were his sons and daughters. And he also had a Vaishya wife. Shurasena had a Vaishya wife, and Parjanya was their son. There were some brothers too. So Parjanya was given the assignment under the Yadu dynasty rulership that he would be in charge, he would be king of the agricultural territory in the kingdom. The capital was Mathura, and then its land holding was the land of Vraja, and he was the king of Vraja. And Parjanya had 5 sons. The middle son was Nanda. His elder brother, when it was time to turn over the kingdom to Upananda, his elder brother, he turned to his middle brother and said, I accept the kingdom and pass it on to my middle brother because he's really the qualified one. And Parjanya was very happy with his humility and his wise choice. So Nanda became the king. And a very dear friend of Nanda was Vrishabhanu. So although Nanda was the king, kind of like he helped him rule. He was very, very qualified Vaishnav and Vaishya. Very wealthy, very learned, very virtuous. They were a good match, the two. And in fact, Vrishabhanu had even more wealth than Nanda. So the cowherd community was going along very nicely, with one exception. There's always a problem, right? Even you're the father of the personality of Godhead, you have got a problem. His problem was there was no children. And different brahmanas performing different yagyas, no children. And same for Vrishabhanu. He wanted a daughter, but no children. So together they decided, let's do this. Let's take the whole cowherd community, there's very nice grasses for the cows on the other side of the river Jamuna. Maybe we'll have different good fortune there. So they agreed, and the whole cowherd community shifted from the western side of river Jamuna in Vrindavan to the eastern side in Gokul, or Mahavan, another one of the 12 forests. And after some time, skipping some details with Nanda and Jasoda, Krishna became their son. And he appeared on the 8th day of the waning moon, the Ashtami. And then came, waxing moon or waning moon? Waning moon. Waning moon. Because Balaram Purnima, then the waning moon, then because we're going to be having the Bhadra Purnima coming up. So, some days later, Vrishabhanu still had no daughter, and at that time, the river Jamuna was flowing a different course. It would flow. His home, it was something of a palace, wasn't like big palace as his ancestral home, but he went to perform his, before the sun came up, the practice of religious elders at the time is they would go to the river Jamuna early in the morning and performing their morning duties, then go back and begin worshiping their deity. So as he was entering into the river Jamuna, he was very surprised because he saw a lotus growing that he had never noticed before, and it was effulgent, glowing a golden color. So he was intrigued, and he walked closer, and inside the whirl of the lotus was a little baby girl who was glowing of a golden color. So he accepted that this is some divine arrangement, and he brought the child back, showed to his wife, and said, "Let us accept this as our daughter." And there was one problem. She appeared to be blind, deaf, and dumb. You know the story? She didn't open her eyes. She didn't respond to any sound, and she didn't cry. Is there such a thing? She didn't cry. She made no sound at all. So they were very concerned. Meanwhile, Narada Muni, knowing that Krishna had appeared, understood that Radharani must also have appeared. So he decided that he would go visiting the homes of all the Brijbasis that had newborn children on the pretense of giving blessings to the newborn children, because they like when sannyasis do that. Give your blessings. So he was searching for a newborn girl because he wanted to see Radha in that form. And he went here and there, blessings, but there was no Radharani. So he heard that Vrishabhanu and Kirtida had a newborn girl. So he went to their place. And they asked, "Do you have any young children?" And there was an elder brother of Radharani. Did you know that? She had an elder brother. And his name was Sridham. Now you remember, right? Sridham, Radharani's elder brother. And so, because later Krishna was often engaged in wrestling with Sridham. And Sridham would always win. So they showed their son, Sridham, and he was a little disappointed. It's not Radharani. So he was about ready, he gave his blessings, about ready to go, and they said, we do have a daughter, and because you're a great saintly person, maybe you can do something. Maybe you can help our daughter become well again, because it appears that she's blind, deaf, and dumb. And Narada was taken aback, said, why don't you show me where your daughter is? So they took her to the room, and just walking into the room where Radharani was, he became stunned, speechless. And when he regained his composure, he said, I think I know some procedures that may be very helpful to help your daughter restore her well-being. I'm going to need some this and that and the other paraphernalia. It was paraphernalia for doing puja for Radharani. And I need complete privacy because there's some mantras I have to say that others shouldn't hear. So they brought the paraphernalia, he closed the door. In ecstasy, he worshipped Radharani. And when he was done, to his heart's satisfaction of worshipping Radharani in this little baby form, he said, well, the mantras didn't work, but I have another suggestion. You can arrange a nice festival in honor of your newborn child and invite all the residents of the area. Be sure to invite Nanda and Jasoda, and when they bring their child Krishna, then all auspiciousness will come. So they did that, and you know it's like when you're hosting people, you get involved in taking care of the people that you're hosting. So that was just a perfect opportunity for little Krishna to go crawling to the place where Radharani was. And as soon as Krishna pulled himself up enough so he could see inside the crib where she was lying, she immediately opened up her eyes and smiled very brightly and cried aloud, and everyone heard the cry. They came running. And they thought, oh, Narada Muni made such a nice benediction. Now our daughter is well again. So we don't hear a whole lot about, from the Bhagavatam, Satyam Param Dhimahi. We don't hear a lot about Radharani's childhood pastimes, but here's a nice painting in the palace of Vrishabhanu when she was just a little girl. Here's a close-up, nice painting. And another nice painting, a little bit older, very sweet, nicely decorated with flowers and ornaments, and getting ready for her next stage of pastimes with Krishna. Because mostly in the earlier chapters we hear about Krishna's pastimes. We don't hear much about Radha's pastimes. But just like in Ramayana, we don't hear about Ram and his three brothers' pastimes hardly at all, although it's called Balakanda. The main focus goes to Krishna's pastimes. But Krishna and Radharani were naturally attracted to one another, transcendentally, and as they became a little older, this is by the side of Radhakund and Shamakund, they had wonderful pastimes with one another. Now remember, this is Krishna's own Hladini Shakti. It's his own potency. And she is the Shakti, or he is the Shaktiman. It's an eternal and natural transcendental exchange between lover and beloved in the transcendental realm. Many of the qualities of Radharani are like the qualities of Sita. She was very happy, as was Sita, being in natural atmosphere. She had a natural rapport with all the living entities in Braja, and her prayer to all those living entities and her communication and her conversations with them was simply in terms of her beloved Krishna. asking for their benedictions, that she may have Krishna's association unceasingly. There's a very nice story about Radharani and a jackal. Maybe you know that story. One time the gopis were walking along a path in Braja, and over on the side in the agricultural field, they saw the cowherd boys making a whole lot of noise, and they had sticks and stones and yelling. So they were very curious what was going on. And so they went over, and they found out from the boys that there was a jackal that had gone down a hole in the ground. Now, jackals aren't known to be nice guys. Foxes are very clever, and jackals are like kind of nasty. And I don't know if you've been in Mayapur. Any of you been in Mayapur? When you go to Mayapur, it's agricultural fields in all directions. And at nightfall, you can hear the jackals howling. You don't see them during the day, but they have a whole jackal concert every night. Really loud. You know, it's kind of like in India where there's dogs, the dogs that bark, and one barks, and then you have a whole concert of dogs responding. And then another one barks, and there's a whole so the jackals do like that, and it goes on all night long. They must be hungry. I don't know what the program is. But they don't like to show themselves during the daytime. That guy's kind of chunky. Generally, they're kind of skinny and scruffy looking jackals. So Radharani went over and asked the boys move away. She rescued the jackal and relieved the jackal and gave the jackal the benediction that at the end of this life, you can achieve the association of being one of my gopi friends. Radharani is very compassionate. It's just the embodiment of compassion for all living entities, naturally so. And the celebrated flute of Krishna is something that there's a nice pastime where Krishna received his first flute. And we're not going to go into that story because we're going to talk about Radharani. But the flute is his natural companion. Just like Ram has his bow and arrows, or Parshuram has his chopper. Balaram has his club or his plow, and Krishna has his flute. And his flute, there's a whole chapter, really fantastic chapter. Read it and then read it again and read it again. It's a fantastic chapter. Chapter 35 of Canto 10 is just about Krishna's flute and the gopis appreciating what the flute song does to others, what to speak of to themselves. Here's a nice painting where Krishna is charming all the forest animals, the birds. See the peacocks in the tree just listening. It's said when the birds are flying over, they become stunned and they fall to the ground. And the rocks that are standing still, they start to flow. Everything moves. Everything becomes transformed by the sound of Krishna's flute. So this is a key part of their exchange. And there's some mischievous kinds of activities that Krishna would do, as you all know. Even when he was a little boy, his butter-stealing pastimes were quite clever and mischievous and non-stoppable. In his later stage, there was this pastime of taking tax from the gopis. So the gopis had the service of milking the cows, taking the milk and making yogurt, and then churning the yogurt to make butter. So Yogurt makes better butter than milk. I've been told. I have no first-hand experience. But Krishna is a very celebrated pastime of Krishna is his tax pastime. Some of you know Raghunath Das Goswami. You know who's Raghunath? You know who the 6 Goswamis? There's 6 of them. 6. Oh, you know 4 of them. Well, they're associates of Lord Chaitanya, and they lived in Vrindavan. They came from different places, but he sent them to Vrindavan. And they moved the teachings of Lord Chaitanya forward into the next generation. The 2 chief ones, Rupa and Sanatan. Who are the other 2 that you know? Gopal Bhatta? Gopal Bhatta. Rupa Sanatan, Gopal Bhatta. Raghunath Das. Raghunath Das Goswami. There's Raghunath Bhatta and Raghunath Das Goswami and Jiva Goswami. That makes 6. So there's something very special about Raghunath Das. Well, there's a number of things very special about him. But he was constantly in Lord Chaitanya's association in Jagannath Puri. And he was very young, and when Lord Chaitanya left, he was so attached to Lord Chaitanya that he didn't want to continue his life. So he decided he would go to Vrindavan, pay his respects to Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, and end his life by jumping off Govardhan Hill. Rupa and Sanatan, he didn't disclose his plan, but they understood his heart because he was so filled with sorrow, and they forbid him from doing this. They said, that's not fair. You were in Lord Chaitanya's association for so many years, and we're over here in Vrindavan. We haven't heard Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. You were right there experiencing them. And Swarup Damodar explained everything to you. You can't do this. You stay here, and every day, for 3 to 4 hours every day, you just narrate pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and explain them. Every day. That's your service. So he did that. He was very, very, very austere, dedicated, fixed devotee. And he's not known for being a big author. We don't know him for being a big author. But he wrote 3 things, and one of them is called the tax pastimes. Dan Gati. Dan means giving charity, but it wasn't charity, it was good tax. So Krishna would tax the gopis. So here, Radharani is, after the milking of the cows, she's passing by with the dairy products in these clay pots. And of course, the loving attraction between Radha and Krishna here seems very innocent, but here is not so innocent. This is Krishna's hiding in a tree along with the cowherd boys, as you see. There's a couple monkeys up there too. And they're taking tax. Krishna's reaching over and grabbing one of the pots from the top of the gopis' heads to take a tax from them. And we're going to hear some more about this tomorrow. Sankati Kaur. We're going to hear the whole pastime tomorrow. Stay tuned. So a whole detailed book Raghunath Das Goswami wrote about the tax pastime. Very, very wonderful literature. Very simple and very sublime. But sometimes the gopis would play tricks on Krishna. Another painting, Krishna was resting, and the gopis came and stole Krishna's flute. Because he was really attached to his flute. And they were a little transcendentally competitive with Krishna's flute. They would say, this isn't fair. This flute is always tasting Krishna's lips. And we're qualified. And not only that, Krishna's flute is male. It isn't right. So when Krishna was resting, they stole his flute. And they had a great time playing tricks on Krishna. And sometimes when they were feeling separation from Krishna, here's Radharani with a peacock feather in her head and standing in a threefold bending form with Lalita on her right, or excuse me, our left, her right, because she has this peacock-looking sari, and Lalita had a blue sari with looked like stars embedded in the sari. That's Lalita. That's Vishaka, and over on this side is Lalita, and Radharani imitating Krishna because separation from Krishna was difficult for the gopis to bear. Sometimes that separation was just fixing her mind on her dearly beloved Krishna. And sometimes she just became beside herself with concern about the absence of Krishna. Now it's puzzling in one sense, and then in another sense it's not, because she is the internal pleasure potency. She doesn't look so happy. She looks not only sad, here's a close-up of her face, she's crying, and she looked quite bewildered. So how can Radharani be bewildered? Or for that matter, how can Krishna be bewildered? Because there's pastimes in which Krishna became bewildered. We're discussing one of them. When the cowherd boys and the calves walked inside the mouth of the Aghasura demon, Krishna became bewildered. How's that? He's all-knowing. And he's all-powerful. And his desire, there's a phrase describing Krishna's power, Satya Sankalpa Shakti, which means he just has to desire something and voila, it happens. He doesn't have to do anything. His potencies do everything. So if he didn't want the cowherd boys to go inside Aghasura's mouth, then how come they went inside his mouth? And how did he become bewildered? And the answer is, it's Krishna's Yogamaya potency, because Krishna sometimes wants to be bewildered. And then the Yogamaya potency comes and does her job, and then it subsides, and again Krishna knows what to do. So similarly, Radharani's attachment for Krishna and love sometimes looks like this. And when Krishna, a very significant part of Krishna's pastimes is Krishna's leaving Vrindavan and going to Mathura. And when Krishna goes to Vrindavan and goes from Vrindavan to Mathura, all the gopis are very absorbed in Krishna, but most important to them is their beloved Srimati Radharani, because Radharani, how is she going to maintain her existence without Krishna? They also, but all the gopis, it is said, they're expansions of her. They're expansions of her. In fact, it goes into detail in saying Radharani has so many good qualities, and of those good qualities, each gopi is a manifestation of some of those qualities. And another gopi is another combination of those qualities, and another gopi another combination. And there's tens of thousands of gopis. She has her most intimate ones, gopi friends, and they have their assistants. They're called manjaris. That's like Rupa Goswami is one of them. Rupa Manjari. is Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Manjari is one of the principal assistants of Lalita, who is one of the primary associates of Radharani. We know that she has so many, and of those so many, there's 108 principal gopis, and of those 108, there's 8 principal ones. They're often shown in paintings, 4 on this side, 4 on that side, each with different skills, for the pleasure of Radha Krishna pastimes. That's their happiness, is their beloved Radha and her meetings with Krishna. And there's no envy, no competition, no material anything. It's all the pleasure of Radha and Krishna. That's their life. And of the 8, the 2 principal ones are Lalita and Vishaka. And Rupa Manjari is the primary assistant amongst Lalita Sakhi's assistants. And we're followers of Rupa Goswami. We're trying to be, at least. So the followers of Rupa Goswami are led into these wonderful pastimes between Radha and Krishna. When Srila Prabhupada established the Krishna Balaram Mandir, the area where the land was purchased is called Raman Reti. Raman Reti is an area where the cowherd boys would go regularly with the cows, Raman Reti. And so the main deity is Krishna Balaram. But the deity of Radha Shyamasundar to their right are so amazingly beautiful and merciful. Those of you that have been to Vrindavan, you know what I'm talking about. And those of you that haven't been to Vrindavan, go as soon as you can and spend as much time as you can before Radha Shyamasundar and feel their merciful exchange with so many devotees. They're very, very, very special devotees. Very, very special deities, excuse me. Very dear to our founder Acharya and dear to so many people come to Vrindavan. I mean, not now because of the pandemic thing, but it's such an important place in the whole of Srila Prabhupada's movement. He considered Vrindavan his home, Bombay his office, and Mayapur his preaching field. But Vrindavan was his home. And it's the home of Radha and Krishna. And their wonderful pastimes performed there. And I want to mention one other thing, and then we're going to see if there's some discussion. I was requested long ago by Madhu Mangal to encourage devotees to take notice in your calendar of the Purnima that comes at the end of this month. And that Purnima is the Bhadra Purnima. And it's really small print, you can't see it. But it's in the 12th canto, chapter 13 of Srimad Bhagavatam. It expresses, this is Sukadeva Goswami saying, or Sutta saying, if on the full moon of the month of Bhadra, one places this Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne and gives it as a gift to someone on Bhadra Purnima, that entitles them to achieve the eternal kingdom of God. Sound too easy. What about sadhana and all those other things? But the Srimad Bhagavatam is so special, and this particular Purnima is so special, that literally all over the world, devotees are very enthusiastically promoting. If you already have a Srimad Bhagavatam, consider making a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam to someone and take a handful of tickets to go back to Godhead. with you and your family. This year, what I understood from Madhu Mangal is our book distribution minister, Vaisheshika Prabhu, based in California. His plan is on Bhadra Purnima, those who have made a gift of Srimad Bhagavatam to someone, it could be some member of your family or someone somewhere in some language, because the Bhagavatam sets are available in all languages. They're going to have a yajna in Kurukshetra, no, in Naimisharanya. Naimisharanya is the place where Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken. We visited there in one of our yatras. It was because it's not far from Ayodhya, or it's not far from, Lucknow. Yeah, not far from Lucknow. So we were based in Lucknow, so we went to Naimisharanya. It's a really nice place. It's really very serene. But we went up and up and up to this hill that it's said, who knows, but it's said that that's the place where Shukadeva Goswami spoke Srimad Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit and the sages. But it's just being there, it feels auspicious. So they're going to have a sacrifice, reciting the names one by one of so many, who knows how many, probably thousands of sets of Srimad Bhagavatam from centers all around the world on Bhadra Purnima. So that's a little promotional talk. But it's Srimad Bhagavatam's words, so it's not just marketing. It's a benediction that comes directly from Srimad Bhagavatam. So I told him, and I'm going to be showing this little poster and speaking about it while I'm here before Bhadra Purnima, so get used to it. And if you haven't already, please consider contacting, there's the website below, iskonchicago.com, and let them know that you'd like to participate or speak to, I guess Vibhu Chaitanya can figure out how to hook you up with Bhagavatam set or 2 or 5 or 10 or whatever you like. Okay, so Srimati Radharani and her appearance day. We're going to speak something a little different tomorrow morning, and then again tomorrow evening, and then again the next morning. Because in China, their Radhastmi is on Wednesday. So the morning class on Wednesday is going to be the evening class for China on Radhastmi. So we'll do something a little different. 4 classes in a row. And we'll tell them about Bhadra Purnima. Okay. So any comments or questions? Hey, here's one right here.
So you're saying that when Krishna wasn't born, then they used to go visit the deities. Who are the deities?
Deities? Did I say deities?
Yeah, you're saying when Krishna wasn't born, you're saying when Krishna wasn't there, when they went to go visit the deities when Krishna wasn't born.
Guru Maharaj, when Krishna and Radharani were not born, when you mentioned that Vrishabhanu Maharaj and Nanda Maharaj, they used to go do their morning duties, come back and perform their deity worship,
they're worshippers of Narayan. Their family deity was Narayan. They didn't see Krishna as God. They saw Narayan as God. And Krishna is just their son, or the son of my dear friend Nanda. They didn't see Radharani as the goddess of fortune. They just saw her as their beloved daughter. They didn't have a sense of the divinity of Krishna and Radha. They just saw them with affection. My son, my daughter. And their worshipable deity, Narayan. You know who is Narayan, right? Okay. Look at this.
Why is there 108 beats in the mantra?
Why there's 108 beads? That's a good question. It's an auspicious number. I'm not a numerologist, but that's the answer I've been given. It's an auspicious number. There's 108 principal Upanishads, 108 principal gopis, and 108 beads, indicating that auspicious number. There's something else to it. If you chant, for those of us that chant 16 rounds, there's a certain number of names of Krishna that we're chanting when we chant 16 rounds. And for those who chant 64 rounds, some people chant 64 rounds, it comes out to just about 100,000 names. And Haridas Thakur, you've heard his name, right? He chanted 3 times 6. Very good. So that came to about 300,000 names every day. So, that's a nice number, 300,000. So for those of us that chant 16 rounds, it's around 25,000. 25,000 names. So anything further for comments and questions? You have something, yeah.
Maharaj, you mentioned that each of those gopis had a special quality of Radharani, right?
Yeah, combination of qualities. The speaker is right behind you. So if you...
Right. So what do I do? Do I not speak in the... Okay. So my question was, and then you further narrowed it down to 108 principal, then 8 main gopis and 2 main, right?
Yeah.
So I have never heard of the special qualities of Lalita and Vishaka and the 8 main gopis. Like what was each gopi's special quality that they became 8 principal gopis?
I've heard it many times, and it's not in my memory at the moment. But if you like, the answer is yes, I would like. I'll do that little research. I know of the places to look.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And it's not only, someone that has written about this is Bhakti Chaitanya Swami. So he has a book that shows drawings of the gopis. There's a certain color of their sari that they would wear, a certain feature of their face, and a certain services that they would do, and certain characteristics endowed by Radharani's qualities that they were known for. And if all goes well, he'll be with us during the Kartik visit to Vrindavan, and he knows where all those villages are around Varsana, because the 8 principal gopis, they wanted to be right with Radharani. So although they were married, their homes were in little villages, little villages, just surrounding the perimeter of Varsana. So I've been to 2 of them with him, and he knows. It's in his system. It's not like information. He has great affinity for each of the gopis and their places and their pastimes, their qualities, their forms, their dress, their ornaments, what they're known for. So if I can find his, a link for his book, that's best, because it's all the pictures and everything's there. And if I can't find it quickly, I'll write to him and ask him where to find it.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I'll get back to you.
Thank you so
All
much. May I ask another one?
Yeah,
If
sure.
that's okay. So the other question I had, so you mentioned that there were 3 internal potencies of Krishna and Radha is the pleasure potency,
Yeah.
right? You also mentioned that there is,
Sandini and Samvit.
the knowledge and the spiritual potency.
Yeah.
So my question here is,
The existence potency. Sandini,
okay,
potency, and Samvit, potency, and Ladini, potency, or Shakti.
so Samvit is the
Samvit is knowledge. Vit.
with.
Samvit is the knowledge potency.
So my question here is, does it mean that we, when we are looking, should we not value knowledge or vidya or jnana as much? Because my understanding is sometimes you have bhakti, but then you also have to compound it with knowledge.
I just, there's a really nice commentary that I researched in the past 48 hours. You know the verse that Rupa Goswami writes, that's the essential verse of the whole Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabi Lashata Shunyam. You know the verse?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. I'll say it slowly. It has 4 lines. Anya, we'll go this way. Anya, Abhilash, Shunya. Shunya, you know, 0. Anya means other. Abhilash means desire. No other desire. Which no other desires? This is the definition of bhakti. Jnana, karma, anavritam.
Doesn't matter.
No, it's to be rejected. Speculative knowledge. So the commentary says, now to your question, the next 2 lines, so that's what bhakti isn't, and the next is what bhakti is. Anukulyena Krishna Nushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. So, but we'll do the first because this is your question. Anya Abhilash Shunya Jnana Karma Dhyanapratam. So Jiva Goswami, this Rupa Goswami's book, his writing, defining bhakti. Jiva Goswami's commentary says, Gyan, that is pursuant to the impersonal Brahman feature, derived by the process of speculation, that's to be rejected. Then he says, however, knowledge of Krishna Tattva, which is essential for developing bhakti, should be explored fully. In that case, then it's not Gyan, it's bhakti. When we read Bhagavad Gita, we're not accumulating knowledge. We're nourishing bhakti. Okay? Clear?
Yes. So then why is it, then first thing is, it was very new to me when you said that Radha is just a pleasure potency. I didn't know that. I thought Krishna had just one internal potency and that was Radha.
He has an internal potency that has divisions.
That was new.
Okay, so the terminology, we say, the English is internal potency or spiritual potency. Then there's Sanskrit terms. That's Swarup Shakti. There's Swarup, and then there's Swarup Shakti. His form. And then there's the potencies of his form. Swarup and Swarup Shakti. So there's another term, it's called Chit Shakti. Chit Shakti is used in different ways depending upon the context, but it can also mean his spiritual potency that has these 3 divisions. Samvit, Sandini, Ladini. So the Samvit, knowledge potency. Sandini, the existential potency. Manifests the Dham and his paraphernalia and, forms and everything. That's Sandini. Samvit is cognizance. And Radha is the pleasure potency. Okay?
Thanks, Maharaj.
Maharaj, I have two questions. One is philosophical question and second is practical application. I have met people who argue and against Krishna, but we in ISKCON have a very nice way of explaining how Krishna is the supreme. So he is the cause of all causes, he is the supreme proprietor, controller, enjoyer, and then we also quote shlokas from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and various other scriptures. But very recently I've come across a couple of people who did not accept Radha because they said not directly mentioned anywhere, and how can you say that Radha is the supreme goddess of fortune? Is there any systematic presentation we have in ISKCON that I can?
There's several, but one like super authoritative one is in Baladev Vidyabhusan's commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Because as you know, the commentary in Vedanta Sutra was written because there was a challenge by the northern group, the Ramanadis, the followers of Ramanujacharya, that were challenging, where does this Radha come from? So it's explained in Jiva Goswami's, Baladev Vidyabhusan's commentary. So that's one source. Now, getting a good translation and wading through it and finding that section, it's not, the front of my mind. I've seen it. I've gone over it a couple of times. But another natural place is in connection with the there's places in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there's commentary connected with Krishna's interaction with the gopis, starting with chapter 29 of Canto 10, 29 through 33, Canto 10, and specifically the commentaries of the acharyas go into it in detail with scriptural references, kind of like bulletproof scriptural references. So someone may not accept, they've got a different view because people have different views, but it's supported by scriptural authority. It's something like people that say, where do you get this? The Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. And there's scriptural authority to say that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. So why is Radharani not spoken about and known about widely for some similar reasons that Lord Chaitanya isn't widely known and spoken about? Not the same reasons, but some similar reasons. The connected with this philosophical issue of Krishna with his queens in Dwaraka, that's Swakiya Rasa, relationship in marriage. And then with Radha, there's no marriage. There's pastimes, etc., but there's not the formal lila of marriage. So it's Parakiya Rasa. And that's, to worldly people, that's a no-no. That's immoral. And so they become uncomfortable, to say the least. They begin to criticize. Those that hold that belief or criticize Krishna or criticize Radharani or trash it or whatever they do, different things. But so if it's just somebody that says, where is the scriptural authority for this? One of the things that Jiva Goswami writes in his commentary on Vedanta Sutra is that the goddesses of fortune I mean, he establishes that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. From the Bhagavatam we know. And then if Krishna is the original personality from which all avatars or expansions come, he has his Shakti. Shaktiman has his Shakti, and she's Radha. And all the goddesses of fortune, all the Lakshmis and everybody, they're expansions of her. With scriptural authority to assert this, to establish this. Now, supposing somebody from a different sampradaya, they're not going to accept that. They have their view because they have their way of looking at things. But it's not falsifiable. It's a teaching that has a scriptural authority to support it. So your question is something I can show to these people that say, you may not accept it, that's okay with me, but there's scriptural authority behind our accepting Radharani as the internal potency of the original personality of Godhead Krishna. So there's those three sources. The commentary on Vedanta Sutra, passages, I'm sure there's passages, it's not in the front of my mind, in Chaitanya Charitamrita where very systematic, detailed kinds of commentary are presented about Radharani, about everything. The postgraduate study literature has all those scriptural references. And in the 10th canto, chapter 29 through 33. To some extent, probably in Krishna book, but for sure in our commentaries of the Acharyas. Because the Prabhupada completed his commentary with chapter 13, and the rest was his followers, making the commentary from chapter 14 onwards. But they rested their commentary on our Acharya's commentary.
I will read them.
Okay.
And then my next question is practical application. So the pastime of Radharani and Jackal that we heard today.
Yeah.
So what did the Jackal do to get that mercy? So how can we?
They didn't have to do anything.
So how can we receive the same kind of?
Just be somewhere where Radharani sees you.
That means the devotees of Radharani.
Yeah. It's just her nature. She doesn't have to have a cause. She's just very merciful. And she saw this jackal being, tortured or mistreated. And she was just compassionate. She couldn't tolerate that. And so she rescued the jackal from that torment, but then benedicted. In your next life, you'll become one of my associates. It's a merciful nature. Okay? Doesn't have to have a cause.
It's like a follow-up to what Prabhuji just asked.
Yeah.
So did the jackal do anything in its past lives that it got that mercy?
Well, probably getting the body of a jackal had something to do with not something good. But I was just hearing today, Prabhupada was explaining, he was giving a class on Canto 1, Chapter 2. It had nothing to do with Vrindavan, but he was saying when people are overly attached to their senses, then they are naturally going to commit sinful activity, knowingly or unknowingly. So he was saying, why do you think there's so many monkeys, hogs, and dogs in Vrindavan? I mean, have you been to Vrindavan? No. There's hogs, there's a zillion monkeys, and it's not just because they propagate very, very readily. there's another reason. And the reason is offense. And you make an offense in the holy dham. You do sinful activities in the holy dham, and you may become a hog or dog or a monkey. So there's sinful people that become hogs, dogs, and monkeys. Now that's not like good fortune. But because Vrindavan is such a special place, it's understood, and Prabhupada said it in this lecture, so it wasn't just like village talk. It's authoritative. That's their last lifetime. From that hog body or dog body or monkey body, they're not going to do any more sins because animals they're not responsible for their conduct. They'll be purified by living in the Dhamma, and they'll go back to Godhead. So the jackal, who knows what the jackal did in his previous life to become a jackal, but he was in Vrindavan. And his path crossed Radharani. That's all. It doesn't have to have like something really. He did some good stuff to get Radharani's association. He just became a jackal and was being tormented.
And so, like, follow up.
Go ahead.
Follow up to that. If, like, let's say he ate prasadam from the ground that was offered or anything like that, would that help his chances
course.
or anything?
Yeah. You have some squirrels in the backyard probably. So go feed them some prasadam. I know some families that, along with their daily offerings, they put a little, some nuts and some things on a little plate, and once the squirrels come to know that that's like lunchtime or something, they're going to come every day. There was a family I was visiting, and they did that. They were up on a, they were in an apartment building, and it was a little bit. They had a little patio thing. It was winter time, and I saw all these little marks of outside the patio. I said, "What's that?" She said, "Oh, that's the squirrels. They know what time to come. You can set your watch by the time. They know they're going to come at this time because there's going to be something there." And so you feed the squirrels some prasadam, and they're getting benefit.
I'm asking one more question. So, like, you can determine what animal you become if you do in the next life.
No,
like,
if you behave like a dog, you'll become a
Yeah.
dog. But it's not like you can determine. Okay, I want to become that kind of a dog. I don't want to become this other
yeah.
kind of a dog.
But if you sleep a lot, you become a bear.
Yeah,
Or
like
something
that.
So, is it like that? There's some animals that are better,
Yeah.
that are higher up
Yeah.
than other animals.
Oh yeah, definitely. And some that are lower. And jackal's one of the lower ones. No one likes jackals. I mean, they're not pets. Like. It sounds really eerie. I can't imitate it properly, but people don't like jackals. And jackals don't like people. They hide. Anyway, yeah, so cows are higher. And then there's others that are, goodness, passion. So the lion, very powerful, passion. King of the jungle. Anyway. Okay. Okay.
This is question from Radha. Just like Radharani was restricted by Jatila and Kutila in meeting Krishna, did other gopis have to go through similar impediments?
Yeah. Some weren't even allowed to come at all. And they left their physical bodies and joined Krishna in their spiritual bodies. That's a very esoteric detail that's hard to understand. But it's described like that.
From Amara Mataji, Are there personifications of Samvit and Sandhini Shakti
I was
too?
asking that question myself this morning, and I was thinking to write one of our scholarly devotees, but I didn't get around to it. So I don't know, and I'll try to remember to do that tomorrow. I would guess, but I don't know.
From Shravan Prabhu. If Radharani is not separate entity, what about Lord Balaram?
What about him?
Is he a separate entity too?
Well, yes and no. I mean, Radharani is a separate entity in that she has this form. But the proper way of understanding the two, Radha Krishna is one entity in two forms. But she has her form. And Balaram is, one can say, not a separate entity, but a separate entity, because he's Krishna's first expansion. So he's a separate entity. But his interest is non-different than Krishna's, and so not a separate entity. Separate entity, not a separate entity. Depends on how you think of separate entity, I guess.
From Vrajeshwari Prana Mataji from St. Louis. What should be our prayers to Radharani on this occasion of her appearance day?
Give us access to Krishna's service. Kindly, just like our Maha Mantra. Please engage me in Krishna's service by your mercy. That's the prayer.
This is from Sachi Sutta Prabhu. How to explain in simple words the Parakya Rasa, especially to the followers of Sri Sampradaya?
I wouldn't really attempt to do it, because they may become irritated. It depends on who the person is, whether you try to explain that or not. But supposing you find a reasonable person, they just want to know what the Siddhanta is, and they're not like judging you or judging the Siddhanta. So, just as you, a Sri Vaishnava follower, accept that Narayana is the source of everything, on the authority of Srimad Bhagavatam, we hear that Krishna is the source of everything, including Narayan. So there's you have a different scriptural authority than Srimad Bhagavatam, which is fine. We respect that. And Srimad Bhagavatam is very clear. Krishna is the Swayam Bhagavan. Krishna is the source of all avatars and expansions. With that understanding, Radha, although eternally associated with Krishna in the spiritual world, there's a Leela when Radha and Krishna appear that there's no formal marriage, but they're actually eternally associated in the spiritual realm. In the Leela performed by them, there's not marriage. That's the simple explanation.
And this question is not related to today's class. From Visalaksha Prabhu. Is there any relation between Krishna Gayatri Mantra and Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? Kindly enlighten.
Well, yeah. Krishna Mantra and Hare Krishna Mantra, Krishna is the center of the mantra. Mantras reveal the Lord. Or through the mantra, the realization of the Lord becomes accessible. So they have the same Lord of that mantra. So there's other mantras that have different presiding personalities. But our mantras, there's one presiding personality. So the formality of the mantra is different, but the essence is the same. Okay?
why are we not talking about Chandravali pastimes?
Maybe we will tomorrow. But normally we don't, because yesterday for the Sunday program I did speak about Chandravali. And Chandravali, according to our acharyas, Jiva Goswami in particular, two things. Chandravali is one of Radharani's expansions. All the gopis are her expansions. Chandravali is not a manifestation of the fullness of Radharani, and but she's Radharani's expansion. And she's chief. The second is she's chief amongst the group of gopis that compete for Krishna's attention and affection. They compete with Radha and her group of gopis. So we don't speak too much about the competitor chieftain. There's this wonderful story in Bhakti Ratnakar. Bhakti Ratnakar is a book that was written after Lord Chaitanya's departure, and it's largely describing the associates of Lord Chaitanya who survived him and performed activities after his departure. Bhakti Ratnakar, very celebrated book. So a pastime involving Raghunath Das goes as follows. He was keeping his residence by the side of Radhakund. And one of the things we know about Raghunath Das was he was very austere. For his food intake reduced and reduced and reduced to the point where in a leaf cup he would take that much chas, which is buttermilk, every other day. So one time, according to Bhakti Ratnakar, he was brought a very large leaf cup with a certain, much larger than the ones that he was used to receiving in Vrindavan. And so they brought him some chas in a much larger leaf cup. And as he was taking the buttermilk, he asked, "Where did you get these large leaves?" And someone said, "Oh, we got the leaves from the village where Chandravali used to stay." And he took the leaf cup and threw it away, because he was in the mood of being an ardent follower of Radha, and the ardent followers of Radha see as competitors Chandravali. I mean, it was a transcendental, spontaneous emotion. It wasn't a worldly us and them emotion. It was a spontaneous, transcendental emotion. He was so absorbed in love for Radha, and Radha in her love for him. There's stories about Raghunath Das and their mutual affection for one another, transcendental. So we don't speak much about her because she's not in the group of gopis that were most pleasing to Krishna. We speak mostly about those who are most pleasing to Krishna, starting with Radha and her associates. Okay, thank you very much. Prabhupada ki Jai.